Okay, let me hit go live. Boom. And we're live. Greetings. Welcome everybody to the August 2021 mymixlab live stream. We're going to be answering all of your questions, and in a few minutes we're also going to be joined by mixing and mastering legend Luca Pretolesi. So we'll just give everyone a couple minutes to gather around. Let some of the first few questions roll in. Oh, good. I can already hear my audio sounding clear. I like that. Usually it's to be up here troubleshooting a disaster live, but today we're starting off on the right foot. Let's see what's going on in the questions. Let's see. I love you guys. Thank you. We love you guys. Let's see. Everyone's getting hype. Let's go. Yep, the hype is real. I could feel it as well. Today's actually, we're right in the middle of the back to school sale at mymixlab, which means all of the individual courses are 50% off, and all of the 1-year subscriptions are pretty close to 50% off. They're only $89, and they're going up to $150 when the sale is over. So that's a huge discount. Definitely one of the best times of the year to start a mymixlab subscription right now during the back to school sale. We've been posting courses every week for, I can't believe it's been a year now. We just passed our 1-year anniversary just a couple weeks ago. Truly unbelievable how fast time flies when you love what you do and you're learning from the best. Lots of love from around the world. I love this. Greetings from Las Vegas. I know I've been in LA for the longest time, but I've actually been living in Las Vegas for about a half a year now, so Luca will be joining us from a different part in Las Vegas. He's actually over at Studio DMI. I'm here at my home studio right now. Oh, I love this question. How do you manage your time effectively? I'm going to answer this one, and then I'm going to let Luca answer this later. For instance, do you schedule a certain number of hours for a mix, or how do you deal with mixes that take much longer than expected in a busy schedule? I love this question. I usually allow myself just 1 to 2 hours on mixing. If something's not going right within 1 to 2 hours, then it's time to maybe switch to a different project or take a break and do whatever else it is on your schedule. So it's more about experience to get quick with what you know needs to be done and having templates that allow you to do it quicker. Then it is more about time management, because you really only have the small window of time that you have. So, and that's a really hard thing to change. So I'd say what you can change is how accessible your tools and your presets are, how well organized all your work is to allow you to get going quicker. So that's my answer. I know when Luca comes on in about 7 minutes, he'll be answering that himself. Let's see, someone asked, what's your number one vocal microphone for under $500? I got to say the Slate MO1. Or if you want to go even cheaper, the Shure SM7B. Or if you want to go even cheaper, Sennheiser MK4. Those would be my top 3. But let's see. I love you guys. I love you guys too. Crazy been here since day one. Yeah, like I was saying, we've been open for exactly 1 year now here at mymixlab, which is unbelievable to think that a year has already gone by. Being locked down, time can go pretty fast because you spend a lot of time at home doing the same stuff. So our number one goal was just offer people a real school-like experience from home without having to pay those crazy tuition fees that schools charge you, and without having to be in a certain city or move or any of that stuff. It's just the way simple online learning should be. Just clear tutorials from professionals showing you inside the sessions of your favorite songs every Monday. So we're very excited to be uploading a new course every Monday. For this week, the course is actually going to be a rerun of this live stream. So we're going to be up here until 12 o'clock, and Luca's going to be joining us in 5 minutes. And Yeah, let's get back to some more questions. Let's see, what's your number one tip for mixing faster? This kind of reminds me of the question that I was asked earlier about time management, but an actual technical tip for mixing faster, I would say, is start from your template. And also know where in your template to go to customize things, because it's not always about sounding the same in every song. And a template would obviously make it easy to sound the same in every song. So it's more about how you use it and how you customize it, but also how much it offers you from the start. So my number one mixing tip would be find yourself a great template or preset. And we actually have a whole new section of templates for most of the DAWs. We're trying to cover all of them. We're most of the way there. Over at mymixlab, we have all these Studio One, Ableton, Pro Tools, Logic, FL Studio. We got vocal templates, mastering templates, some using stock plugins, some using your favorite third-party plugins. But if you don't have any templates yet, I highly recommend you check out that section of the shop at mymixlab. Let's see. Thank you for the world-class education at an affordable price. Well, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you having you aboard. How do you deal with high tone 808s? I would say the higher notes, if that's what you mean by high tone, are probably the easiest ones to deal with because they need the least amount of distortion to cut through the mix. People think that because it's a higher note that maybe you have to do more to it, but those are actually the ones that I treat less. So I would say maybe turn down the volume of those so they don't sound so loud compared to the lower ones, and treat them with less distortion than you would treat the lower ones. That was a great question, though. Let's see. Someone said we need some more waves presets. We actually have a whole bunch of waves templates for vocals, mastering, I think other stuff too over at mymixlab. Hello, hello. How do you deal with kick and 808 phase issue? I definitely have an answer for this, and Luca would probably have his own. But my answer would be zooming in and reducing the volume of whichever sound you don't want to take precedence. And usually that's going to be the bass. So I like to go in and manually reduce the volume, or you could do it with sidechain compression. But I kind of like the flexibility of drawing in my own curves and cutting out my own bass. Just using the old-fashioned way, just using the mouse. Boom. Oh, and Luca's going to be joining us in just about 2 more minutes. Take a couple more questions. Let's see. What is the difference between the different versions of Auto-Tune? Aren't they supposed to do the same thing? I would say the difference would be how many extra features they have in addition to that same thing that they do. Because you're right, they all do the same thing, but they all do extra things on top of that. So the more expensive versions just do more extra things on top of that, if that makes sense. Like I know Auto-Tune Pro, the top version, has a feature that allows you to manually tune notes, not even doing auto-tune. So it's almost like having 2 plugins in one. Whereas the basic version is just your retune speed and your key and the things that you need. Let's see, we'll take one more question. How do you use an imager? I prefer to use imagers on my synths group, mostly is where you find it, or on my drums group. Things that I want to be cleaning out of the center so that a vocal can take precedence and an 808 or whatever else is in the center can take precedence. That's my number one answer. And we're about to be joined by a very special guest. We got a whole bunch of really great questions coming in. Hang on a second, let me switch my OBS over here. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing three-time Grammy engineer, Luca Pretolesi.
Yes.
Hey, welcome
Hey,
to the live stream. Thank you for joining us.
thank you. Great to be here. I miss sometimes it is live on YouTube because there's so much information you can capture just from conversation between us. So it's great.
I know, and we do this every month, but it feels like it's been so long since we've done one.
I know. Well, I mean, this it's kind of crazy with the be stuck in the studio. It just changed your perception of time, and it's very, very strange. But
And
it's
speaking
okay.
of studio, that's a different room that we normally see you in. What studio is that?
Yeah. So Studio DMI. This is Studio M, and Studio M. It's a very minimal mastering room. We do pretty much only stereo mastering and prepping sessions. And it's a very small room, but we love this room. It's sounds fantastic. And then you can see the desk from there, but the desk essentially it's a very small 1U that has keyboard and mouse, a monitor controller. That's it, full in the box.
I love that. That's actually really relatable to a lot of people because
Yes,
a lot of people just have a laptop and a pair of headphones. They don't even have
exactly.
an interface. They just have whatever's in the box. So it's really refreshing to see that professionals operating at the highest level have very similar setups. And that's
You
actually
think?
the basis of a lot of our courses at
Yeah,
mymixlab is skills that can translate into your actual projects. Because I know you see Luca often in his big studio with lots of big gear, and it's easy to think that that's stuff that you can't do because of that reason. But when you see what's there in mymixlab and you apply these techniques, you'll realize right away that you can achieve the same results very easily
yeah.
with these presets that you get directly from Luca's sessions.
I agree. Also, the benefit of just be able to focus on your DAW without distraction of a million pieces of gear around you, it just make you more it's more effective because you kind of squeeze the best on what you have. And on top of that, I think, I mean, at this point in 1 year and over 1 year on my mix lab, we tried so many solutions as far as like, okay, hey, you can achieve this result using this plugin, or you can do without a plugin. At the end, you really want to invest on yourself because you are the pilot. You're going to run the system. So many people can access to the same tools, but then it's your sensibility and your ears, your intuition. So it's up to you, I think.
I love that. Let's get to some of the comments and questions. There was one that I answered earlier that I really want to hear your answer for. How do you manage your time effectively as a mixing engineer? Do you use a schedule or limit yourself to a certain amount of time on each song?
Good question. My day start the day before, so I end my day prepping then the following day, if it makes sense. And then there is a general schedule, which is the Studio DMI schedule that I kind of follow. I try to fit. So, and we have a little bit of team. So Jacob is setting up our schedule. So the work is coming to the studio, and I'll make sure to be on time for my deadlines and everything. But there is a second schedule, which is my personal one. I want to make sure that I'm able to give 100% to every mix. And then to me, it's just a discipline. It's just be able to get ahead of everything that I do and leave always a little bit of gap and space and time for me. I think one of the worst feeling is when you are working on it, knowing that you are late and you're rushing through, knowing that you can do better if you have more time, but then you need to compromise. That's what I want to stay away from. So the day before, I kind of look at my schedule for the following day. I go to sleep. I try to wake up in the morning and do something not related to music every day. That's kind of like detach myself and then reset my ears. Can be exercise, walking, drink a lot of water, stay away from sugar early in the day. You're going to have so many crash if you don't do that. So I'm very, very big on what you can do as far as like your own discipline to just perform better on your job. This case for me is mixing or mastering.
There's a lot of great advice in that answer. And I think my favorite part was how you said you tackle session preparation at the end of the day. That's so important because mentally, what are you most easily able to tackle at the end of a day? Probably just routine stuff where you already know what to do. Like session prep takes away a lot of the critical thinking and creative thinking and risk taking and decision making. You know, it's just to color these tracks this way and route this that way. And you're able to get a lot of progress done even when you feel fried, like, so to speak. So that's a great technique. And that way, when you feel fresh the next day, you're able to tackle the most important, the most critical, the most creative. You're able to tackle all those really important decisions. So that was my favorite part of that answer. And I was talking about my answer to that before is I usually just cut myself off after a couple hours and say, okay, there must be a problem somewhere else if I'm still mixing or if I'm still mastering.
I agree. And then one mistake sometimes I see even on friends or myself back in the days was that you get stuck at one point to the mix, and then that little element essentially will compromise the entire experience of the mix, because in the back of your head, you're not happy with the sound of the kick. So now, because you're not happy with the sound of the kick, we're still moving forward into the mix, but you keep still going back and thinking about the kick. So I think if you get stuck, just make an executive decision. Say, okay, eventually at the end of this mix, I'm going to recheck the kick. I might export a new stamp for the kick, but then from now on, I just move fast, try to enjoy the process, have fun. If you cannot get paranoid about one element, you risk to essentially make an average mix just because one element is just like bother you. So move on. And I think every mix, you learn something you can apply to the next mix. So if you do for commercial purpose like I do, yes, you need to be very careful what you release. But if you do for yourself, don't try to make the best sounding mix and do 2 mix a year when you can do 50 mix a year and then improve over time the quality.
And also, you're talking about kick in 808, which reminds me of another great question. How do you deal with kick in 808 phase issues?
First of all, I like to go back to the source and check the quality of the stem. In case of 808, okay, there is a different notes, and then on the progression of notes, we want to make sure that lower notes translate good as the higher notes. Much easier to have higher notes in the 808 to just cut through the mix. A little bit more complicated on the lower notes. So I want to make sure that I really take a snapshot of the entire 808 bass movement, and then the relationship with the kick drum. Sometimes I see on stems that are receiving, people try to make everything sound so thick, so big. And then, for example, to have 808 already has a lot of tails, a lot of sustain. It's a sine wave, so the sine wave has a lot of sustain. Adding a very thick kick drum is not going to help. So you should make a decision. Say, okay, the kick drum, it's going to be thin on purpose. It's cutting through with a really short, small transient, and then 808 is taking the tail and the body of the low end. So it's more making a strategic decision at the beginning. So make one of the two win in some cases. And understand there's also a stylistic approach where trap music might have a certain way to kind of like sit the kick in the 808 versus more R&B, down tempo, change the way the kick 808 works. Almost like the kick, it's extremely low, it's not even there, just like the 808 movement. So you need to think about, okay, what music, where I'm sitting as far as the music space, and then what is my priority? And then make sure the quality of your stems. Don't distort 808 to the point that it's become a saw, and then you have phase shifting happening constantly where essentially you have distortion that has spikes. So it's important. And I think if you make the 808 be the lead element of the track, be ready to kind of compromise a few others and leave space into the mix. Don't try to have everything that needs to be in front of the mix.
That's great advice. Yeah, you really have to pick one to take precedence.
Yeah.
Ooh, let's see. Where's this is the other one that I wanted to ask you too. Oh, how do you use imagers? Do you have a go-to place that you tend to put them in your mix or master?
Yeah. So imagers, to go back what it is, it's a way to manipulate the mid end side. So the stereo field. With the ozone imager, you can do multiband, which is pretty cool because multiband, you can set up a crossover point and say, hey, up to 150 hertz, I want to be mono or almost mono. And then want to open up and then close again and open up. So you can kind of shave your side information on your mix. In my case is, if I use on the stereo bus, the approach is very different than if I use on individual sounds. So on stereo bus, I like to use the imager on the multiband mode, where I kind of make a decision and I divide sometimes in 3 or 4 parts of the spectrum. And I like to have this kind of tree effect where I stay very mono, very close at the beginning, and then I open up a lot on the between 3 to 500 going up to like 2-3K to give him a light body, and the track feels very open on the stereo field. Just because it's so mono before, you're going to feel this kind of difference between mono and stereo. And then I keep it open and I start to close a little bit with the third band. And then the fourth band, if the track is rich of high frequency transient and a lot of tail reverb on the high frequency, I might close the last band a little bit to avoid to have out of phase happening on my small tweeter on the speakers.
I love that answer. Wow. That was really detailed. Actually, I have to try that on some of my tracks with the way that you have that like tree-shaped theory that you go by. I love that.
Thank you.
Let's see. Do you need an AD converter to do mastering? Or do you need other stuff too, or can you do something with an AD converter by itself? I hear you talk about the importance of those a lot. Can you explain exactly like what they're for to a beginner?
Right. All right. So let's say that you're working full in the box, and then you question yourself, say, do I really need an expensive AD converter or DA converter, or an interface that's an expensive ADDA? I will say it's not really essential to have AD converter if you're mix or master in the box, but the quality of your DA essentially is the translation of your mix on the real world. So it's not just because you're not going to process anything out of your DAW that you don't need a professional DA. The quality DA, it's a way to go into the speakers, trusting the sound of the speakers, which translate the sound of your song through the DA. So the DA quality is very important because especially you want to trust the low end. And I noticed on a very, very inexpensive, we talk about like headphone output or your laptop, the low end, it's not even close to a DA. It's not even super expensive, like an Apollo or, you don't need like a $5,000 DA, but I'm saying don't settle with the headphone output with the line out going, into the speakers. That's will be extreme. So I would say if you go for a $1,000 audio card, you're in a good place. You know that you can trust what you hear. Now, at one point, if you decide to record vocals or to have any type of processing, that at that point, the ADDA, it's also important. But I would say just for listening purpose, try to, if you can, invest a little bit more on that. Again, you don't have to go for $5,000 a Prism or Dangerous, but at least something that it's an industry standard.
Absolutely. And something that will help you have a confidence that what you're hearing coming out of the speakers is what everyone else is going to hear coming out of your speakers. And I think that's the number one thing that you sacrifice when you're just mixing out of the headphone jack is you're lacking that clarity that what you're hearing is truly what you're making.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Reid, I want to share one of the main, I would say concern, my main frustration that we have as a business with studio client is the listen environment and that the standard that average client sometimes trying to explain to us what it's trying to hear. So give an example. Hey, I'm listening to my track, and then I don't hear much the kick and bass. I don't hear much like 70, 80 hertz. And then because the room has a cancellation point and phasing issue, there is a curve. So because they're not able to hear it, they keep pushing. So in our case, when I send my master for them, say, hey, can you just push a little bit more the kick in the 808? I say, hold on. Are you trusting 100% your room? Because if you're sending to mastering, this means you need a second pair of ears. You need a room that is extremely linear. That's the purpose, right?
Exactly.
So a lot of people, and I noticed when I got rough mixes, they have curve, tonal balance. They're off, not because they're not good, just because they're trusting a room that you can't trust, if it makes sense. So, and then back to the concept of good quality DA, decent speaker position, a room you can trust, headphone that you can trust. Make sure that before you commit to send to a label or send to an engineer or just put it out, make sure that you are listening on an environment you can trust. And then if you don't trust your environment, trust your headphones. And we talk about headphones, but really it's important. You know, many times we feel, wow, this song is so bright. And then I ask question to the producer about his room, and I notice they overkill the room with too much high frequency absorption. Now they keep pushing high frequency because it's simply that they can't hear it.
That's funny. Yeah, that would make sense that there could be a conflict between their listening environment and their opinion of the song and why they sent the demo to you sounding that way. And something that you could do to solve that is by having multiple trusted listening devices, speakers you trust and headphones that you trust, and maybe even a Bluetooth speaker that you're familiar with spending a lot of time listening through. Whatever that third thing may be is almost just as important as the first and second listening devices.
At the same time, don't play too loud. Like every room, even the most treated room, if you stress the room, you start to get a little bit of reflection. That can be low end, they can be top end. But essentially, if you are in a small room, if you're able to capture the speakers on the way out instead of capture the speaker on the back from the back wall, it's much better. So if you push too much, if you play 120 decibel, which is crazy, on your room, you're going to get so much from the back of the room coming back to you, versus if you play 75 decibel, you're really going to hear the speakers come to you, minimizing the reflection from the back and from the ceiling. So I would say play low, learn how to understand your speakers at low level, and then you can minimize a lot the room.
Shifting gears to a different topic, with all the different types of compressors out there, how do you pick the right one and understand the difference between them?
Okay, very nice. So go back in history. There is a reason why we had VCA compressors like SSL, for example. And then we have optical compressors like Fairchild. We have FET compressors like 1176. They all work with different technology, and most likely they behave in a similar way. If I think about a VCA compressor, great for stereo bus, for drum bus, because it's extremely fast, musical, almost, I understand, started as a compressor to reduce dynamic range, but then over time became one compressor that actually give you some groove and sense of movement to the music based on the type of behavior of the VCA type of compression. Optical compression, they are typically very slow and very smooth. So CL1B, that's another optical. So the way that they work, they always try to be very transparent, out of the way. You don't feel the vibe of the compressor. You feel the compressor is doing its work, which it can be like slow attack, slow release to do something more smooth, or like slow attack, fast release to kind of like work with transient. But I think if you think about it, it's 1176 style compression, very snappy, hard, good for snares, good for like smash, like room mic. And then you think, again, Cell 1B, optical compressor for vocal, very smooth,
That's my
and very
favorite.
transparent, very thick. And then VCA, groovy. When I pick compression right now, SSL, G, or type compression, it's for me for drum and stereo bus. Can be Cell 1B or any optical compressor for vocal, and then 1176 type compressor for drums. So that's kind of the three type of compression.
That's a great answer. Do you think that mixing for Dolby Atmos and 5.1 stereo surround sound for Apple and all these new platforms will become the industry standard?
Wow, we are in the middle of actual big installation here, Studio DMI and Studio D. Studio D is gonna be like a Dolby Atmos room. We are really deep into that.
Whoa.
Yeah, yes. And then we're doing this. This is going to be an official Dolby certified room. 11 speakers.
11
7,
speakers?
2, and 2. So yeah, 11 speakers.
Oh,
So
wow.
I think the biggest difference now, as far as 5.1 to the Dolby Atmos for music, is Dolby Atmos for music translate if you have 7 speakers or you have 64 speakers in the same way. So before we talk about the business side, but just about the technology, how crazy is that? Imagine you have a sphere, and this sphere, you can place so many dots that you have. Every dot is an actual speaker. And then if you put, let's say, 64 dots, or you put like 11, the translation eventually is going to be the same, but with more resolution and more accuracy when you move up and down or left and right.
Right.
So what that means, the 5.1, that's now I think it's obsolete system, you have to have a 5.1 system and you place strategically certain instruments, certain speakers. With Dolby Atmos, essentially you rotate, you move, and then based on the amount of speakers you have, you can get a more accurate response. And then because it's for music, essentially if you listen on headphone, you can work on binaural, so you can encode in a way that you can really translate on headphones. Of course, not good as a room, but very, very close. So Dolby Atmos as a software allow you to listen on headphones on binaural or speakers on the room. So I think back on your question about if this technology will stay, will grow, the fact that it's being endorsed by Apple, say, hey, on Apple Music, we want to have Atmos mixes from now on. And because Dolby, it's so deep into home system, but at the same time now with Apple Music, and then now because of Apple Music with AirPods. So I think I'm not sure it's going to take from the stereo normal mixes entirely, but I think it's going to be, especially because gaming, especially for so many reasons, I think can be a standard on the immersive sound. So the Dolby Atmos, I think it can be for a long time a new standard as far as like immersive sound in alternative to stereo mixes. Now, one bad news about for dance music about Dolby Atmos is forget about compression, limiting, clipping. Done. We are not summing on a stereo channel that we can for aesthetic and sound do some limiting, clipping, and
no.
yeah, bye. We can't, because now imagine that you have all these stems open, they're running. There is no summing. There's no point of close the mix and do limiting or clipping the way we do. And our first Atmos mix that we did as a test, it's different. It's not bad. It's just different. You don't have a sense of glue that you add on stereo music.
Interesting.
They're settled right now to minus 18 at UFS, 48 kilohertz only. So the good news is you're not going to have distortion ever again on Atmos. We have so much headroom. And imagine that you have imagine an old school board with all the channel running at the same time, but in every channel goes out on a speaker, so you don't have an actual stereo bus. You're not gonna clip. But I mean, maybe in a few months, Reid, when we're gonna do another of these videos, by that time we're gonna have an Atmos room set up, and maybe we can do a tour or we can check the room.
I can't wait to see that. On the topic of speakers, do you think 5-inch speakers are good enough for music production, mixing, and mastering?
Why not? Again, go back to don't stress the room too much. Don't play too loud. Of course, we have a little bit less headroom. I like 6 inches, but I think, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I would say you can get used to anything and do great work in anything.
Of course, there is no limitation. It's more train yourself to adapt and work what you have. And then why we tend to have this bad habit, everyone, like myself. Now I'm controlling myself a little bit more, to turn the volume up based on the content. So if we do kick and bass and we play loud, and then why we don't learn how to set a level, and then that's it. Forget about the knob and just learn how to stay at the same level regardless what you're doing. That's the way I can describe it. I think we talked this in other videos. To me, is be able to talk to somebody next to me, and keep working without constantly lowering the level. If I'm able to do that, if I'm talking to a friend and I'm working, this means I'm playing music on an actual fair level that it's better for human ears, right? So we can talk and listen music, and then we can talk and work. So I think train ourselves to work on lower level, it's a win. It really is.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's important to not have to shout over the speakers to communicate with people, because it just makes everything harder.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you have any tips on how to get started mixing and mastering?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, it's so a case-by-case scenario, right? So I feel interesting fact about mixing and mastering, different than, for example, any type of sport, right? Football and soccer, you get better with age, and then you kind of use experience in your own favor. But most likely, as a mix and master engineer, you should be able to be detached. And actually being detached, it's going to work for you. You can have an objective approach on what you do. So I will say, start with, you need a general knowledge on, you need to speak the language and have a general knowledge. So you can be a guitar player, and then from there going to production, and then going to mixing to be like a DJ, and then from DJing. So you need a starting point. It rarely, actually, I don't recall anybody that start. I'm not in the music production business. I just want to be a mix engineer, master engineer. I think that's a second phase for everyone. So that's another point. If you understand music, doesn't mean that you are like a jazz piano player, but if you understand the foundation of music, you can create a line of communication a little bit better. You know, when you're mixing at 808, perfect example. If you think about a C note 808 will work, I don't think so, because you know where C note is being placed, you know the frequency. So get a general educational. Doesn't mean spend 5 years to learn how to become a record engineer. It means just get the foundation of little bit of everything, and then pick what you like. Mixing, I think, is a production. You need to still have a production mindset. Mastering, you need to have a listener mindset with a technical ability to make critical decisions. Think as a one file, right? So in my case, that I'm both. When I'm on my mastering mindset, I never approach mastering with a mixing mindset, where I try to control individual elements, having just one stereo file. I try to say, okay, I'm a listener, but then with a technical understanding how we can achieve certain things. And so back to the question is, I will say start from general knowledge first.
I love that. In my situation, I was mixing before I was even realizing what mixing was. It was just how I got the sounds in my production to sound the way that I wanted. And then I would put a master chain on there because I knew that that was something that you were supposed to do. I didn't even really know why. So I was even mixing and mastering before I understood why, but it kind of holds true to exactly what Lucas said, where you kind of end up mixing and mastering through another purpose. Like you were a musician trying to record yourself, and boom, now you're trying to figure out what the difference between home recordings and pro recordings are. And or you're a producer and you want your music to sound comparable to some other producer that inspired you's music. So it's always a second step, like Lucas said. It's usually not the first step. It's not how you get started. So you're usually already doing very similar things before you get started mixing.
Yeah.
Because of how many things you have to understand, like Lucas said, to make the right adjustments.
Right.
Let's see. I love this question. Speaking of making the right adjustments, do you high pass all your masters? Or is it something that you do case by case?
Oh, it's case by case. Well, also that's another point is if I do traditional stereo mastering, I essentially translate what the mixer engineer or the producer decide to do. And then in my case, if I feel that I pass, low pass the entire master a little bit will help to gain some headroom without sacrifice dynamics, I might do it. I like to, if I can, I like to replace high pass, low pass filter with shelves. And the way I do it, I use high pass, low pass to make kind of decision. Okay, I want to cut up to, let's say, 33 hertz, and then after 16K, and then I do 12 dB. Then when I feel I find the right spot, I switch from high pass filters to shelf. Now, shelf, what is the benefit for me? That they're variable level. So high pass, low pass, you have no choice. You're gonna do like from here, you're gonna do like this. But then if I do a shelf, I can raise this, so I can have the same curve of the high shelf of the high pass filter, but with the possibility to gain the level and even automate a little bit the level of that I'm shaving top and bottom.
I like that. And you can also use your shelves to be more of like a reduction instead of a removal.
Exactly. You reduce the energy, you're not removing the energy.
Right.
And especially when you have nice compression on the low end. For example, you have like 808 as extension. If you're able to reduce a little bit the energy of that, you're gaining some headroom for the final for the mastering, so for the limiting. But if you're cutting entirely, it's going to get very cold. So I would say reduce the energy.
Are there any things that you do in all of your tracks? Is there any one step that you could put your finger on and say, all my tracks go through this step?
Yeah. Well, every master that I do, I check for any type of unwanted ringing happening through the track. The ringing, the way I can describe it is you have multiple layers or multiple instruments hitting that frequency at the same time on that specific note, and they create almost an overloading effects on that point. So when I find those ringing point, if I was Pro Q3, for example, I just like put little dots on those ringing point, and then I might, especially using dynamic EQ now, reduce dynamically those ringing point when those amount of layers are hitting that point. So check your ringing point. I do pretty much every master starting. So beginning of the chain, say, okay, there's any ringing going on because limiting and clipping at the end of the chain will bring low level information up. So that ringing that's maybe there, but you can really hear much. Then when you put a lot of limiting, the typical effect is, oh, this master is so harsh. Like it's like almost painful, or like the high frequency, I feel like they're so fatiguing. It's might be caused by ringing. So that's something that I do pretty much every master.
Speaking of mastering, someone said, when I use limiting on my mix, my closed hi-hats become squared, almost sounding like open hats. How do you deal with this transient problem while using limiters?
Good point. So I use way less limiting today than 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and I use a little more clipping, because clipping, you kind of cut the peaks, so you leave some, you create some edge room to raise the level of the master. Limiting, you are shaving the transient, and shaving the transient, this means that the moment you push the transient down, you're extending the tail of the transient up, so you're getting essentially on the high frequency, those close hats become like hooping hats, very sure.
Makes your cymbals sound reversed really quickly.
Sorry?
It can make your cymbals sound reversed really quickly.
It's true. It's true. And then you're going to lose punch. So many things. So 2 things that I do. One, if I use a compression on my stereo bass or master, I try to do it on the mid-range portion only. So if I use let's say Pro C, for example, to talk about like a very popular plugin, on my sidechain EQ that I have at the bottom Pro C, I just purely compress the mid-range. That way, I'm raising the RMS level in the middle, which is something that I really gonna feel on small speakers, but I'm not over compressing the top ends. So I do that on purpose. 2, I'm careful with make everything wide, super wide, over 710K, because at that point, if it gets really wide, it's equal to bring the side information up into the mix. And then if I use limiting, now what I'm doing, I'm literally crushing the side information. That will make everything sounds kind of fuzzy and thin. 3, if I use analog limiting or even in the box limiting, I do mid-only clipping. So when I do the clipping, I do a mid-side mode. That way I'm not clipping the side. And again, I leave the side more relaxed, more open.
There was another question that I saw that was on the topic of limiters too that I wanted to ask you. Oh, here it is. What is a maximizer? Is it a clipper, a limiter, or something else?
Maximizer, it's a combination of limiting and clipping, where it's something that I'm not crazy about the concept. It's kind of, I feel at this point kind of dated, because the maximizer started like the L1, L2 was, oh, okay, you pre-qual to 0 using a mix of techniques. And the mix of techniques are limiting and clipping. So you, on the old school way of maximizer, and still even now Ozone as a maximizer, you're doing a compression that essentially, check my ends. Compression usually is like this. And then when you do limiting, maximizer, you do like this. So here, this threshold point, and now it's purely constantly compressed. And that compression has become limiting. Now, it's limiting first to keep the waveform stuck on top of the ceiling. And then you have a pre-qual limiter, which is a clipper that avoid to go over 0. So it's a combination of the 2. Now, you don't have the flexibility, in my opinion, of using 2 separate plugins. One, to do an high quality clipping first, that high quality clipping, like standard clip, for example. And we have a good video that Reid, you did on mymixlab about standard clip. So
yeah, that was actually 2 weeks ago. I dropped the clipping for beginners, where we dive deep into every knob, menu, and function in standard clip and explain why you'd want to choose all those different choices. Really great beginner's course if you're looking for the absolute basics of clipping.
I recommend everyone to watch that one, because if you understand an high quality clipper like standard clip, as far as like linear phase clipping, means that when you clip, you're not going out of phase, you're not have phase shifting, which is something that affects the sound on clipping. So go back to the point is, you clip first, so you raise the average level up, cutting those peaks. So you have like this mountain and valley, you cut the top of the mountain, and then you're able to have edge room to push up. Now, when you do that, you might want to use a little bit of limiting. That can be any type of limiter. You can go from a Fab Filter Pro L to an Acoustica lift, to anything that you like. Now you have the benefit of clipping, that you kind of like retain the dynamic range and you're able to kind of squeeze a little bit in a transparent way. And then limiting will make everything a little thicker. With everything's going to sound a little bit more glue and louder thanks to the clipper that you applied before. If you go on the other way around, you're going to see your Pro L or any other limiter you like to use having a lot of like picking and try to deal with those heavy transient. If you do clipping first, you're going to deal with the transient first, if it makes sense.
It does. How often do you combine multi-band compression plugins with your analog compression or your desk in general?
I do more like a technical in the box before I go out if I use analog mastering. And then I like to use, so if I do, for example, multi-band, it's a good idea for me to do it before I go out on the analog world, because with multi-band, I can make some static decisions. So, okay, this song has the low end that is so loose, so much dynamic, that when I hit my analog gear, the analog gear is kind of suffocated by too much dynamic that is coming out to my DA. So if I do a little bit of multi-band before I go out on the analog, I'm able to retain more dynamic control on the low end, maybe on the top end, if it's like full of like spikes of transient. So that's a good approach. And then I go out on analog, and the analog, it does what analog does best, which is vibey, and it sounds kind of thicker and expensive. You don't have the control you have in the box plugin, but you have kind of the thickness in that sound. Then I go back into the DAW, and when I'm back in, at that point, if I'm happy, I just simply make a level that I'm comfortable with. So I might do a little bit of in the box clipping after my analog limiter and clipper, just to raise the level to the point that I want.
Oh, here's another question about stereo mastering. Is the Haas effect the only way to add stereo with when you're mastering, or do you take other approaches?
No, there is other way. So if we talk about in the box, if you use Imager, for example, you have an option to delay, to create a little bit of delay on the bands. That automatically will create a little bit of stereo. You can do that. Another option that a lot of us forget, that to create site information, you just need panning. So if you take simply, if we try this example at home, it's going to be so much fun. If you do a drum kit, and then you do kick, snare, open and close hat, 1 bar looping, everything mono, and then you're gonna monitor just the side alone, just the side, and move a little bit the open hats to the left, a little bit of snare to the right. Immediately you're gonna start to feel the side. It's the side essentially is everything that is out of phase, everything is out from the center. So a good way to me, if you have the flexibility to do mastering, but also be responsible for the mixing, if you feel there is some missing side information, go back into the mix and pan a little bit certain instrument, and automatically you're gonna feel the side more rich. Another one is if you have layer of synths, especially lower synths, stabs and chords, they have a big impact on the stereo field. So if you do that, why you don't try to parallel your chords and make extreme stereo on those stabs and chords? Those gonna feel the side so well, it will translate so well on mastering.
Oh, here's a question that I think I can answer. How do you make vocals sound up front? I know my number one technique is make sure, one, you have good microphone posture and distance and you're using it correctly so that you can apply the right effects afterwards. And then as far as the effects go, I'd say parallel compression makes the biggest difference in how upfront my vocals sound. All the other plugins that I put on make more of like a small adjustment or a small reduction. Parallel compression is what I would say makes things smack really hard. And for me, that's the Waves CLA76 Blueface preset is my go-to.
Sweet.
Yeah, I really like that question. Do you use the Oxford limiter, Luke? I've seen you use other Oxford plugins before, but never the limiter.
I use sometimes the limiter on the I can't say in English these words. Inflator? What's the name of
Inflator?
Inflator. Thank you. I like both. So the I like the Oxford limiter, but sometimes I'm worried that it's actually changed too much the envelope. If I have heavy drums, I have a control attack and release, but it feels like I feel it's a borderline compression. So I'm careful to use that. Of course, huge fan of Diamond Lift, obviously, and I like Standard Clip, and eventually I like Pro L, but I like Pro L on down tempo music. I have a hard time using the Fab Filter Pro L on like 120 BPM and up. I feel that it's kind of slow. It's a slow limiter, but it's each case. I almost like I have those tools in front of me, and then I grab what I need based on the content, the music that I need to process.
That's a great answer. Let's see. Someone says, nice room. I want one just like that. Actually, the funny part about this room is this is the room that has really no gear in it outside of the computer and the desk. It's just well acoustically treated and wonderfully lit too, might I add. But yeah, it's the beauty is in the simplicity with that Studio M that Luca's using. I really like looking at courses and pictures. Everything from that room is just great. It's a cool little studio. So yeah. I agree with that comment. That wasn't even a question. That was just something that I agree with.
Yeah. Yeah, and also this room, they keep you focused on the music because you don't have a much like distraction here. I mean, if I look around, I have the desk, I have 2 speakers. That's all.
That's a great point. Let's see. When you're using your other room, can you give us a quick run through of your analog chain on your master bus?
Yeah. So I like to start when I work hybrid and I do summing. I have my hit my stereo bus. There's compression and EQ, and then I do it in a way that every micro decision that I'm making, it's translated by the Studio DMI EQ and compression. The compression could be a combination of SSL or the new compressor we're building right now, or the dangerous compressor. But I try to have those pieces that have like the big heavy lifting and the most like impact on the sound to translate everything else. So I make the initial decision with my DMI EQ on, compressor on, with a certain tonal balance that I like. And then at that point, I'm gonna kind of forget that I have those elements on, and every small decision will translate through that. And that's what make my experience faster, fun, and most important, I retain my sound. One important element, I think for an engineer is to have your own sound. And your sound is made by the color, the tone that you have on your mixes. So when I jump on different master that I work, even different style of music from Latin to house, I still recognize my sound based on the tone and the approach that I have. So as far as analog gear, if I can expand a little bit about on Studio I setup, we are summing on 32 channel. So we have a 16 clean summing and then 16 color summing that I use mostly for drums with a Dangerous to Bus Plus. And then some into SPL mastering desk. And I have a lot of inserts that I can choose for. And I always start with EQ and compression. Sometimes my in the box, it's so close that just a little bit of analog flavor helps. Sometimes works best to stay full in the box. So it's a case by case.
Oh, I see our winner from Fix My Mix 01 is in the house. Greetings, PackBot official. Thank you so much for joining us. You actually have...
Oh, wow. Those Fix My Mix are so much fun. It's interesting to actually feel. I want to believe that a lot of techniques that we share in my mix lab, actually they're being applied on Fix My Mix, because those Fix My Mix, the fix sometimes is so little because they're so good.
Yeah, and the difference comes out enormous too. Even if you just fix their master, you can make a huge difference in how the finished song sounds and how impactful it is. And that's a contest that we run every single month. We pick one winner from all the subscribers who email us their music to be featured as this month's Fix My Mix winner. And we also do one live stream like this every single month. And if you're looking to subscribe to all of our courses, right now is probably the best time because we're running our back to school sale, which means 1 year subscriptions are only $89. And that gets you access to all of our courses and templates and everything that we do for the entire year, live streams, Fix My Mix, you name it. It's all going on at mymixlab. And if you're not interested in subscribing, we also have individual courses that are on sale for 50% off right now too in the mymixlab shop. So thank you so much, Luca, for joining us and answering all of our questions. If you want to watch a rerun of this live stream, you'll be able to see it in the courses section where the subscribers of mymixlab can access all their other courses. And we'll catch you guys next month in another live stream. We do this every single month. We usually just pick one random Monday to do it. And we'll be posting the rerun, and we'll even post some fun clips too. I think there was some really helpful information that people would love to hear on social media as well.
Amazing.
So thank you so much, Luca. Yeah, have a great day, everybody else as well. Thank you so much for joining us at mymixlab, and we'll see you next time.